Welcome to Biology of Marine Mammals. I'm Dr. Leslie Williams, and this lecture covers the northern elephant seals, but the female reproductive side of things. In this lecture, we're going to go back to Año Nuevo State Park, a premier breeding site for the northern elephant seals, where we'll meet up with Ranger Frank Balthus as he discusses birth, lactation, and newborn care, fertilization and implantation, and finally female choice and breeding. Let's turn to Ranger Frank as he first discusses the process of birth, lactation, and newborn care among northern elephant seal females. Welcome. I'm Dr. Leslie Williams, and we're here at Año Nuevo State Park with Frank Balthus, State Park Ranger. Thank you so much for being with us.
No, it's a pleasure.
So, Frank, we're here with a rather small harem of northern elephant seals in one particular part of Año Nuevo. I was hoping that you could talk a little bit about the female reproductive cycle, starting with how the females come out and then what they do when they get here.
Okay, the females that are here now, we're early in the breeding season, and during the fall they are still out at sea. They've been out at sea since they last finished the molt, and most females are out of here in late spring. By June, most females are out at sea and they're feeding over many months as they're pregnant when they're at sea. And the first female to arrive on the mainland usually is in early December. And the females haul up onto the beach and go up into an area that they would think is a good area. There's some males here at the time, and they haul up into an area that they think would be safe in terms of giving birth to their pup. Within 3 to 6 days after arriving, they give birth to a pup that may weigh between 60 and 80 pounds. And so the pup is black when it's born, and that's so that it will absorb the sunlight, better able to stay warm because it doesn't have much fat. When later in life, they need all that fat when they're out at sea, but when they're first born, not much fat. And the mother will vocalize to the pup usually. It's important that they bond because the pup will be very dependent on the mother for milk, for nursing it. And so into a safe location, there'll be some males there, usually with a dominant male, and giving birth to a pup. The females will nurse the pup for approximately 4 weeks.
Okay.
And the pup grows from that birth weight of between 60 and 80 pounds up to maybe 250, even as high as 300 pounds in 1 month.
Oh, wow.
So it's really critical that the pup be able to stay with that mom and get that nourishment over that period. And at the same time, it's a transfer of weight from the female to the pup, and the female loses weight, and she may lose up to 40, even 50% of her body weight.
Wow.
During that period. It's a direct transfer of weight from mom to pup.
Is the female feeding at any time during this lactation?
No, she is, once she gives birth to the pup, it's sort of like putting down an anchor. She's there with her pup, and there's no going out to sea.
Okay.
Unlike California sea lions that do, when they're nursing over a longer period, they go out to sea and come back and go back and forth. But elephant seals have to stay right there and right with their pup, and so it's important they choose a good location.
So that's one of the reasons why they have such a short lactation period then, is they try to transfer as much energy as possible to the pups, and also that allows them to get back into sea sooner. Is that correct?
That's correct. That's correct. Because at the end of that period, the female will be at the edge of starvation. You can imagine losing that much body weight, and they need to get back out to sea, or they would risk being so weak that they couldn't survive.
Okay, and of course losing all of that insulating blubber layer as well. It's important that they go back out quickly and replenish it, or they could actually not have the insulation they need as well, right?
Exactly.
To summarize, we learned that females haul out shortly after the males and almost immediately give birth to a pup. The next 4 weeks mark a period of intense lactation, whereas they transfer a large amount of their own body reserves to the pup through very fat-rich milk. It has up to 60% fat, which is much more than human breast milk, which only contains about 4 to 5% fat. Now, during this period of lactation and newborn care, they're not receptive to the males. So we're going to turn back to Frank Balthus as he discusses them coming into estrus, fertilization, and implantation. So once they get into estrus, though, most of the females have picked a harem to be in, and so presumably copulation happens right before they're ready to leave for sea?
Yeah, what will happen is when they go into estrus, the alpha bull will usually mate with the female in the harem, keeping other bulls away so that his genetics would be passed on to the pup, the strongest bull that's been able to keep other bulls away. He'll mate with the female, maybe one time, maybe more. And then when the female leaves, we call it running the gauntlet, that she goes down the beach and there'll be maybe 10 or more males waiting down below to try to mate with her on the way out.
And these are some of the subordinate males?
The subordinate males that are down below. So if there was some reason that the male was not fertile, the alpha bull was not fertile, the subordinate males on the winner between the subordinate males, maybe the beta bull or one under that, would be able to mate with her on the way out, and it would ensure it'd be very difficult for a female to leave without being inseminated.
Okay, and then the females, once they get inseminated, do they implant right away?
So the females are so underweight, they've been under so much stress, having nursed their pup and lost so much weight, they're not able to support a fetus at that time.
Okay.
And so what will actually happen is it stays in a blastula state, and it stays suspended and does not implant in the uterus until they've been out to sea, they've been able to do some feeding, and then we think that when it does implant in the uterus is when they come back to molt, which is 2 or 3 months later.
Oh, okay.
So the females come back in the spring, they've been out to sea feeding for a while, getting some fat reserves built up, and then they can support a fetus. So it's really magical how it all works out.
So even though they get fertilized here, maybe at the late February, that sounds
right.
about
Well,
right?
The first female that arrives in early December would be leaving by early January, mid-January, and the last female to arrive in February would be more in March or later. So it's all cyclical throughout. But
okay, so there's not really like a couple days where there's mass fertilization, but rather there's an alpha with a harem who, as the females come into estrus, is able to fertilize and then they leave, but the implantation actually seems to happen a couple months after that.
What's interesting in terms of the seasonality of it all, the actual peak for the greatest number of copulations is Valentine's Day. In that part of February would be when the mass number of females are ready or going into estrus is right around Valentine's Day.
It's a hallmark moment, I'm sure. Now, we just learned that a female comes into estrus at the very end of her stay, at which point she is inseminated by preferably the alpha male of the dominance hierarchy, but possibly one of the other subordinate males if the alpha male doesn't inseminate her efficiently. Now, interestingly enough, insemination just means the sperm makes it into the vagina where it then finds the egg, but the implantation of the resulting embryo is actually halted for up to 4 months, and this is for 2 reasons. First and foremost, it allows the mother to build up her reserves again. Remember, she's been very depleted by all that lactation. So she gets to go out to sea, feed for a while, and build up that blubber before she actually has to also nourish a growing embryo. The other reason is it keeps the reproductive cycle on an annual basis. The actual period of time where the embryo grows from a blastula all the way to a full pup is only 8 months, so the 4-month delay keeps it on an annual cycle. With that, we turn to our last interview, which looks at the breeding choice of females. So when the females actually haul out, so for example, we have 6 or 7 females out here right now. Have they been here this whole time, or do they run up and down the coast looking for a spot to haul? How do they choose their location to give birth and eventually kind of stake out their claim here for the winter?
Well, they choose it by where they've been successful before. Now, the older females, of course, have been here. Elephant seal females give birth almost every year. There's no time off for school, or they're every year giving birth, and it's very difficult for them to leave without being impregnated. So they look for an area that they'll tend to return to the same area if they've been successful.
Okay.
Now, young females don't have that experience, so they may experiment with other areas, go to other areas, and they might choose a bad location. So pup mortality is much higher with young mothers than it is with older mothers. And once they come up, they like a flat area that's above the tide line, where the main thing is to get above where the storm surf is,
okay,
because that could wash away their pup. And then into an area where there's a dominant bull that will keep other bulls away. That's really important to have some peace when they're nursing their pup. You don't want an area where there's constant intruders trying to mate with you when they want to nurse their pup and give their attention to their pup.
So how would you rate this area?
This area is a smaller harem, and it may go up possibly to as many as 30 females or something, but that's a small harem. Some harem areas may have up to 300 or 400.
Wow.
Really, it's like living in New York rather than living in Escondido, or in the big city versus a smaller city.
And so do the harems get that large because the location is so desirable?
Yeah, it's a very desirable location, and because so many females were born in that location or returning to a place they know and they've given birth there before, they tend to return there.
Oh, okay.
But we have lots of room here for new areas with harems, and the main thing is that they're able to get up away from the tidal influence so that the pups aren't endangered.
Now, this year has been mild compared to some years, but and that probably helps with the elephant seals and their reproductive success, but are there years where there's a high level of pup mortality or even some lower reproductive rates than you might expect?
Yeah, a real threat to the elephant seals would be in El Nino years, when we have a lot of storm surf and winds. When you get a major Pacific storm coming in, you could get winds 70, 80 miles an hour.
Oh, wow.
And very high tides. And the younger females sometimes will locate on the beaches and give birth to a pup. Once they have the pup, they really can't move very well with that pup.
Right.
And the high tide and storm surf. On the island, sometimes there's been up to 80% pup mortality.
Really?
From pups being washed away. And when the pups are very young, they're not, if they get washed away, they may wash away and come in somewhere else, but they're separated from their mother. They can't feed, and it's a real survival issue for them. They need to be near mom.
So there are certain years where there's not very many surviving pups due to storms and winds, is that correct?
Especially on the island. On the mainland, there's areas that they can get up away from the ocean, and there's a
Okay.
pretty good survival rate. But out on the island, where there's not as much, they can't climb up the cliffs, they're trapped, they really need to have a way to get it to higher ground.
Now, we just learned that although females may want to select harems with the strongest alphas, these are also going to be the most crowded harems, and therefore they pose their own risks. For instance, females are more likely to get separated from their pups during this time. The pups could be crushed during copulations, and of course females are going to be more susceptible to being inseminated by a subordinate male like a beta male or possibly a sneaker male. So that's one of the things that females have to think about. Do they want to go for the best locations with the strongest alphas but have more risk, or do they go for maybe a less strong alpha but there's more benefits to the female in the long run in terms of risk? And with that, I will see you next time.